All right, welcome to We Articulate Podcast. I'm Daniel,
And I'm Miles.
and if you know, you know.
And if you don't, well, ask somebody who does.
Indeed. Go ahead and take the time to like this video, share this video, leave us some comments. We would love to hear some comments from what you think and things that we can discuss about, or you have questions, opinions, and something that you're just generally concerned about.
Which is a lot of things. Yeah, we'll respond the best we can.
Mm-hmm. If it's a good question or a good topic, we will most likely even bring it up in the podcast while we're discussing things. So just go ahead and leave us that comment. Help us beat this YouTube algorithm.
Whoa. I mean, the whole reason for this podcast really is to have conversations about what's going on in the world, not to, I guess, bicker and argue like children, but to have actual conversations. So, if you have anything useful, let us know.
For sure. So what have you seen in the news this last week?
Where do I start? There's been a lot. One thing I would like to bring up, I'm not much of a basketball fan, but there was something I found on the Twitter sphere just the other day. It had to do with a press conference, if I'm not mistaken. And you know more about these players than I do. What was the status of these players that are speaking out against what's happening right now?
Uh, I guess you would call them the unspeakables, right? The ones you don't want to talk about, the unvaxxed, you can call them anti-vaxxers. Not really. I don't think it's applicable when they're simply talking about a mandate that they don't agree with. At no point in time did we ever see, them saying that anything was bad, right? We can all agree that these vaccines have been effective in some way, shape, or form. But these NBA players have been talking about, how they don't think that it should be mandated, how it shouldn't be forced or compelled.
Yeah, and what did the NBA come out and say? What are they responding to? I guess let our audience know. For those that don't know, what were they responding to?
So the NBA hadn't really mandated it. They hadn't said that their players had to get it. But what they said was those players that didn't get it and went to play in a state that a mandate was required and they were not allowed to play the game, they would lose money, right? So they're attempting to withhold monetary payments in order to kind of kowtow these NBA players.
So you're mandating without actually mandating. Essentially,
I don't know if I would go that far. I mean, all they're really saying is either you do it or no check. I mean,
I think that's probably my biggest problem with the whole idea behind the mandates is it's literally to be a part of society now. It's becoming you have to do this. It's no longer and I know people are going to say, well, you can choose still, right? It's still your choice. But at the end of the day, I mean, what choice do you really have?
Well, it comes down to more than that, right? It's either you do or your livelihood is on the line, right? Your career is on the line, your family's lives are on the line.
Oh, everything.
Right? Being unable to support those that are near and dear to you, right? Those that are in your household. That puts quite a bit of stress and turmoil inside that inner working system. And when you do something like that, I mean, most people will feel compelled to do it just for the sake of worry about how they're going to feed their family or pay their bills.
Yeah, what was the player that we're speaking about? I can't remember off the top of my head.
And Andrew Beal, I believe.
It might have been what he was going on and saying about what happened, and he put in the way of people's feelings, right? Like what they believe. And his whole thing was what happened to respecting, how people want to feel about things, how they so choose to live their lives. And a lot of people are out there going to say, well, that if you don't have the vaccine, you're going to catch it and you're going to spread it easier. And something he brought up, well, he's already had it. He's just as likely to spread it as someone who has the vaccine. In his mind, it wasn't any different.
Yeah.
I don't know what. and they say the science is still emerging on this. There's conflicting views out there, but we don't really have, I guess, anything concrete on COVID. But we can look back at previous diseases.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, viruses all kind of act relatively similar. And I think he has a very valid point when he says that reinfection amongst someone who's already had it is of equal value as someone who has a vaccine. So, I mean,
right. So, yeah, I mean, and then I think that's probably one of the bigger questions is, the natural immunity versus a vaccinated immunity. And there's not enough evidence out there. There's not enough data out there to ascertain either or, right? And so I think people are entitled to feel a certain way about being compelled or forced, right? We still live in America where we're supposed to still be free. And it's looking very much so that this is an unlikely outcome in the very near future.
That's what I think Fauci today, I think he went on and said we need to rethink what we consider to be, your freedom. We need to rethink that when it comes to COVID.
Yeah, and it's not just Fauci, right? You see all the media talking heads, all the blue check marks on Twitter saying, "Screw your freedom." What makes you think that you have the right to make these kinds of choices,
mm-hmm.
right? And they want to prostrate at the feet of these people that say, "Oh, well, you're putting us at risk." Well, if you've been vaccinated, right, you shouldn't have anything to worry about.
That's what I've seen that funny meme going around. You need to protect, or you need to be vaccinated to protect the vaccinated from the unvaccinated who have yet to be vaccinated, or something along those lines. Like, in order for my vaccine to work, you also have to have
vaccine, that's the most circular thought process.
Isn't it though?
It's like the snake eating its tail, right?
That's essentially what's happening, and we're seeing even the vaccinated population. Remember when it used to be a very rare event that someone would come down with COVID that has been fully vaccinated? It used to be very rare,
mm-hmm.
and now, I think
your numbers are shooting up.
I have a feeling most people, whether they admit it or not, are going to realize that it is not rare anymore. That this is more of a normal phenomenon.
Breakthrough. It's a breakthrough.
But breakthroughs. I think I'd be fairly certain to say that this is not, the vaccine does not help you not get the virus. It just simply prevents your symptoms, which is good, right?
Symptoms, right? It doesn't make them as
good,
dangerous.
Yes.
Which is, that's fine. But when have we ever talked about
be careful
things of this nature that we've had other things like this come up, right? Other diseases, other
yes.
issues. And at no point in time have we ever had to come out and mandate things, right?
Oh, goodness, no.
People have always had the choice and the ability to do as they saw fit, right, with their health situation and that of their kids, right? They're talking about shots for kids from 5 to 12.
Well, that's what Newsom, the governor of California,
yes, I saw that.
And what's shocking to me, the biggest part of this. So, explain what he said, and then I'll get to my point.
He essentially, he's saying any child from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade, if they want to attend school, will have to be vaccinated.
And this is not only public schooling, but this is also going to apply to private.
Yep.
Which that's the point I'm trying to get to. I'm not sure the legality behind that.
Public school, you could probably you could get away with that, right? Because they've already done that with the vast majority of vaccines,
mm-hmm.
and they're effective, right? We agree to some extent that they are effective, but when you go into the category of a private school, right, that is privately funded, it is paid for, right? It is essentially, right?
Yeah.
You talk about you can't regulate Twitter because it's a private company, right? Well, that's the same idea that is here with a private school or a private business.
Which
right?
is fast. That just further goes into the point we kind of made earlier. In order to participate in society, they're going to make you get this, and they're going to say it's your choice, right? You can still homeschool your kids,
mm-hmm. But they're compelling you, pretty much by force, to bend the knee.
By force. That's We're not Australia yet, but
Yeah, I mean, we haven't gotten to that length.
I mean, remember what people used to say last year, though, that you were a conspiracy theorist if you thought that any kind of vaccine mandate was going to be a thing?
Well, I mean, they said a lot of things. I
Oh,
mean,
like
there was conspiracy theories about everything, like, right?
Yep.
You know, this will be done in a little bit, I mean, it spiraled, right? For the longest time, it was, we'll be done with this by the end of 2020.
What was the very
And then it
first
was,
thing?
we'll be done with it by by spring of
spring.
2021.
Yep,
And then
yep.
it was fall of 2021. And now they're saying, well, maybe spring of 2022.
Well, I don't think they have any reason to want COVID to be done. Remember how well the whole, I want to say, like, ethos of America was doing prior COVID. Think back before COVID hit America. We were doing great. Our economic growth was through the roof, and our inflation numbers were sub 2%, which was shocking. If you look back in history, usually the great economic growth usually kind of coincides with high levels of inflation. We were
Right.
not witnessing that. I mean,
Yeah, no, for
things
once
were great.
for once we had seen people being able to make more money without having to pay more money for products and goods and services, right?
Wasn't that nice?
And it was yeah, I mean, it was very nice. I mean, people were walking around saying, "This is the most money I've made."
It
In
was
my
for
life,
me.
right?
I can
Every year I'm making more money than I've ever made.
attest to. I was one of those people. I made more money in 2018 and 2019 than I did any other years.
And now here we are in this situation where, right? You never let a good crisis go to waste.
Who made that saying? Because that is, yeah, it's beautiful.
I recall Hillary Clinton, or maybe it was an advisor to Hillary Clinton. I cannot recall off the top of the head.
I mean, it's so true, though.
But I mean, that's
so
what they
true.
said, and they've always utilized that, right? Anytime something has happened, the easiest way to legislate or to mandate, right? Because a mandate is not it's not a legislative law, right? But they've always used these opportunities to slide in and create more governmental overreach.
Because at the time, usually,
Because everybody's going to be willing to
Everybody's
allow
gonna be
that,
okay, yeah,
right?
yep.
They're panicked and they're willing to give up that freedom for a little bit more security.
just
Which
like
in the end, it's doing is slowly suffocating the system of freedom.
it's the slow erosion of freedom. That's exactly right. That's what happened after 9/11. That massive overreach of being able to tap into people's phones, spy on what people are saying
The
to each
government
other.
would never spy on us.
That's true.
The redacted.
Not true.
We'll just have to use the redacted from here on out.
It's just it makes me very sad to think, and this, I guess, back to California. I do not want that to come here to Nebraska. I mean, what if that becomes a nationwide push? Which children are. I don't want to say they're not at risk for this thing, right? But it should absolutely be up to the parents, especially if they're sending them to private schools, to be able to decide what goes in and what doesn't go into a kid. I mean,
more kids have been shot in Chicago than have died from COVID.
whoa, wait a minute, hold on.
That's just statistical facts.
I don't
right?
hear about this in the news.
Well,
What are you
wouldn't. Of course
saying?
we wouldn't. I mean, Chicago is fine.
It's on
It is
fire.
100% fine.
That's actually funny you bring
They're
that up.
having rolling gun battles in the city.
Oh, I've seen the pictures of that chick hanging out of the car with the AK.
No.
Or that was L.A. I don't know.
There are
Somewhere.
videos all over Twitter of like SUVs just rolling by, just in full-on gunfights through the streets of Chicago.
Which is frustrating for me as a legal gun owner, and I imagine yourself as well, legal firearm owners. It's very disheartening to see that, because what better way to try to hamper legal gun owners' rights than to post pictures of that, to say, this, look at what these, gun violence is doing to America.
It's a pandemic now.
According
to the CDC.
It's hard for me because I get it. If we lived in a larger city and we had those problems, we don't have them here. But those are people that are not legal gun owners. I mean, what's the percentage of those people that legally obtain those firearms?
Very small percentage.
So then we'll say, well, if you just took guns away, made them illegal, we wouldn't have those problems. Well,
The guns aren't being secured legally in the first place.
Is
so
it,
you're not
that's my
changing
point.
the stats.
Yeah,
All you're doing
not
is making it impossible for, the legal citizen who has the right to defend themselves. You're making it so that they're always going to be in a victim situation because they won't have the actual ability to, defend themselves, right? And they say an armed society is a polite society, and I think that is correct. You wouldn't have seen things of this caliber in the Wild Wild West, right? You see all the Western movies, but it wasn't. It was never.
bang, bang.
It was never as dramatic as what you see, right?
Well, wait a minute. You saying that that Hollywood movies are not an accurate portrayal?
Never.
100% of the time.
Never said that.
I mean, I always thought I could go
They
fly a helicopter and evacuate someone off of the top of a burning building, and I don't even know how to fly. Yeah, I'm good at it. I watched the movie once.
I played a game. Had helicopters.
I read a manual once.
I glanced at it.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
The Cliff Notes.
That thing was like, nope.
It's frustrating though. I think what's happening, and I don't have 100% personal knowledge of what's happening down in Mexico, but to my understanding, the regular population really has no access to firearms. The only ones that do are the people committing crimes, the cartels.
Yeah.
So it creates this huge imbalance of power. I mean, if you're a farmer down there, right, and you're against the drug trade going on, you have no way to stop it. Even if they come in and say, we're going to take all your stuff, we're going to take your land, we're going to take your profit, we're going to use it for our route to transport, drugs up to the Americas, you have no way to say no. Mm-hmm. You have absolutely. You say no and you get disappeared.
Well, have you paid all that much attention on what goes on down at the border? I've watched been watching some podcasts, right, and I've been hearing from guests that are down there, right, that are videotaping or they're actively working with Border Patrol, and the level of violence, level of trafficking of children, of drugs, is. There's numbers that have never been heard of or seen.
There's no enforcement
in the history of America. And and Border Patrols are saying, like, there's not much they can do. Like, there are boats just being paddled up, and their Border Patrol is having to help them out because they're not allowed to do anything to stop them.
So this happened last week. I almost forgot about this. This happened last week. Sorry for not posting a video last week. We're still getting this all worked out.
Yeah.
But last week, the pictures of the Border Patrol on the horses.
Whipping?
They were whipping, right? And this was reported by multiple news agencies. The president himself came out and
banned horses from the border.
So the Border Patrol can no longer use horses because horses are racist. That's what I got out of it.
Yeah, and then it turns out that the photographer who was there said, no, nobody ever got whipped, and the photos were being taken out of context.
Way out of context. So these guys were just simply doing their job. It's like all these liberals out here that have armed security, right? And their armed security gets someone out of their home, right? They say, you need to protect my home, right? And these people try to come into their home and they remove them from that vicinity.
Yep.
And that's
then
a big no-no.
But what they say is, well, we removed them from my home, but they can come and stay in your home.
Yeah, we're gonna go put them in the neighbors.
We'll do it by gun force. We'll do it by gunpoint. And you don't have an option. I mean, the plebe can't. You can't fight back against the government. We're too big.
That's true. Unless
you
have nuclear warheads, or was it F-15s?
Or maybe some goat herders.
What? The Taliban make the Taliban great again?
And I don't think you need to help them do anything. I think they're doing just fine on their own.
I think at this point,
in all honesty,
they're probably doing well.
But
isn't there people still trapped in Afghanistan? Is there not Americans still over there?
I believe we are on like day 26 or something of, some Americans are, but they, in all fairness, it wasn't like they wanted to leave yet.
That's what they said, right? They wanted to stay there,
to come, of course they can come back, but some of them just weren't ready to do that, and they're, when they're ready, they'll let you know.
They'll make their way through the blockades and through the gunfights, and
but I mean we're still dealing with some very difficult situations over there. I mean, we're literally paying ransom money to get what few Americans are left over there out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of it was
Did you hear what
privately funded at that point.
Did you hear what they said about the I know. Did you hear what they said about that family that they blew up?
Oh, you mean the last strike?
The one we drone striked?
That didn't happen.
What they said was, we would love to give the family money, but we don't know how to get a hold of them. And even if we did, the Taliban would just take their money.
They would just take them. Oh, we're kind of an asshole by saying that, right?
So, not really. I mean, that's just what it is. I can't make this up.
That's what did they spend? I heard a report. I was listening to NPR during that whole situation, actually, and someone came on and said they paid them, for every person, I guess, that the U.S. unintentionally kills overseas, they pay them a set amount. I think it was like $2,000 for every person killed to that family. So at the end of this goes back not just in this administration. I guess this was prior administrations as well.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on, let me get the cat.
Yeah, go ahead and let that thing in.
We tried so
little monsters.
It did get on the basket.
Told you. Cats ain't dumb. They know what's up.
I don't know, my cat's pretty dumb, but I mean, it's pretty smart, I guess.
But I mean, I think that's the situation we're in right now. I mean, we just don't. Our government just does not have the ability to really do anything correct.
I'd like to say we're probably. I mean, we at the very least we used to be feared. We might have been laughed to get. I mean, people say we were laughed at when Donald Trump was the president, right?
Mm-hmm.
We weren't respected in that sense necessarily, but at the very least, I think you could say people feared us. If nothing else,
there was at least an uncertainty of
you couldn't.
We don't know what's going to happen. Therefore, they played the situation a little bit slower than they would do right now.
Oh, absolutely. I think a lot of people would agree with that. You wouldn't try to punk a country like that and then just laugh in their face when Trump was president. Now it just seems like nobody cares.
No, China's doing what they want to do. North Korea's doing what they want to do. Russia's doing what they want to do.
So nobody fears any kind of retribution from anything.
Yeah. I mean, America has lost its standing as the world power right now. I mean, we're in a position where if something doesn't change, and I mean, I don't agree with America involving themselves in every war or interventions in other nations. Right? We have our own problems to deal with.
A lot of them.
But there is a situation where posturing matters.
Yeah.
But you can't posture. You can't, kind of go full Hulk mode, if nobody fears you, right? If you can't go Green Man status, then you're just Bruce Banner.
Wasn't it some country out of the EU? It might have even been France. I know they were pretty ticked off about that submarine deal. But they basically came out and said, we need to figure out a way to operate the European Union without being reliant on the U.S. because they are so undependable at this point. I mean, we lie about everything we do, and even when we don't lie, we suck at our job. Well, the whole Afghan pullout was a complete disaster.
The government just sucks at everything, and us allowing them to have the amount of power that we allow them to have is astronomically stupid.
This is an interesting concept in my mind, right? Can you imagine living in a government where the government literally fears the people, where the people actually feel, and I have never grown up feeling like I actually have power against the government, which is odd because the government is supposed to be working for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm more afraid of the government than anything. This was never supposed to be this way. I can only imagine what it felt like growing up, 100, 150, 200 years ago when that was actually the case.
Yeah, and I mean, the government was intended to protect the population from foreign and domestic invasions, right? It was never meant to be an overseer of all governmental issues, of state issues, of city issues, of smaller little regions. it especially to the point where it's at now, right, where it is as large as it is. There's no way possible that it can be able to determine the best policies for individual suburban neighborhoods,
Oh,
let alone
absolutely.
a state.
Absolutely.
I mean, you're talking about micro to macro, and it's there's just too much. The if you wanted to have a government that could control every little aspect, it would have to be 1,000 times the size of that, and the overreach on that would be essentially an agent living in every house with your family. I mean, that would be the only way you could do something like that.
I mean, some people would claim that already is already a thing.
I mean, Big Brother is.
You hear what Joe Rogan came out? I know this is kind of off topic. Joe Rogan said he said the shot of Biden getting that booster shot, which we come to find out later on, it was actually like
Staged on the background.
Staged set. So I made the funny comment that, some people would claim that the previous administration was a reality TV show, right? Well, I mean, would that make this administration a soap opera?
I think it would make it a sitcom.
Would it?
I think it would make it a sitcom.
But it's not. I don't find any of it funny other than it's actually happening.
So it would be like the old Shakespearean tragedies, right? You've got sad face, happy face, kind of split. I think that's where you would sit, right? There are parts that are sad. There are parts that are funny. There are parts that are so sad they're funny, or so funny they're sad.
That's exactly true. I mean,
that's the stage.
We have more going on in the world than I can remember. Just everything. Obviously, COVID kind of set that situation up, and you would expect in a time. This is almost like a wartime environment at this point. There's so much going on in this country. It feels almost like we are at some kind of war, not a physical war, but it kind of has that sense of urgency. And we do not hear from the president ever on anything other than a here's what you're gonna say guy, right? You give him a note card that says this is what you're gonna speak about. Don't take questions. Walk off stage immediately. And he doesn't even do that very often. Like, if he did that once a week, I mean, I could give him that. But when was the last time we heard this guy say anything about anything?
Yeah,
I mean, you'd think that there's nothing going on, that everything was fine in this country, because we never hear from him.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a very great situation. I mean, no matter how you look at it, no matter what you do.
We gotta do something with the cat.
But no matter what you do, or you can't get out of here, kitty. There's just nothing you can do, right? I mean, when the president himself isn't coherent enough or able enough to make statements on his own. He's not able to take questions without knowing what the questions are and how to answer that question. It puts us in a very awkward position where we aren't looked at as something on the national stage of the global stage of, okay, there's still a dominant force, right? There's still something to be feared. What you're left with is a sitcom, a sad tragedy.
He's not a leader by any sense of the word. I do not find. I mean, have you met anyone? And I guess we will probably have a skewed view on this. But if you were to follow someone into battle, whether or not you like the guy, Joe Biden is not someone who inspires confidence at all about anything. Whenever you hear him speak, do you feel the confidence, even if you don't like him? Like, and I'm going to use AOC as an example, right? Mm-hmm. We may completely disagree with what AOC says, but in my eyes, at the very least, she has a core group of followers that will follow her into battle, and she is at least is able to rile up those supporters.
Yeah.
If nothing else, right?
Yeah, I think you've got somewhat of a point, right? But people they're more likely to follow somebody based upon their competency level, right? So AOC fans believe that she is competent, and that's why they are willing to follow her, and other people that don't agree with AOC would say she's incompetent, right? And therefore would not agree. You'd have to have somebody who's got more than a plurality, right? You'd have to have a majority that would agree that you are the most competent person to do the job.
And do you think anyone believes that Joe Biden is the most competent person?
No, the polling shows that he's obviously not being showed as competent
At all.
right? Everybody. I think the last poll I saw was at upper 50s, maybe into the 60s, of people saying that Joe Biden he's clearly lost some of his mental faculties, where he's just not able to make good points. He's not able to stay on topic. He's not able to get out his words or his sentences correctly. He's constantly struggling with the teleprompter. I mean, just the easiest of things, that being able to read something as you're trying to give some sort of speech. I mean, it's just right in front of you,
which is really sad, because I can't. I mean, when was the last time we had a president that made us look so ridiculous? And a lot of people out there are going to say, well, Trump made us look ridiculous. At the very least, the guy could speak offhand anytime you asked him a question.
I mean, you need to understand, he would, if he could, he would have rambled
with reporters
for hours,
and they would have had them drag him. Exactly. At the very least, and we're going to say, Joe Biden was supposed to be the most transparent, open presidency ever, right? That's what
we're not seeing transparency
at all. Nothing.
And I think that's an issue, especially going into this $3.5 trillion package with another additional 1.1.
Oh yeah, the reconciliation and then the infrastructure bill, right? That's what
yes.
So that got scuttled, right, over the weekend.
It's for now. I mean, it was just postponed down the road. They signed a temporary spending package to try to work out a deal in between then, right? Mm-hmm. But you'll end up coming up on another governmental shutdown, where they'll have to either sign some sort of legislation or just sign another small little package to push that down the road as further on.
So what was in this bill? The 3.5. So there's two separate bills.
There's two separate, right?
And the progressives said they won't sign it unless you sign them both together.
Yes,
they have to be one.
They had agreed in the House to essentially say that we will sign the 1.1, and they had got Republicans to agree to that.
This was bipartisan.
But then they said there was underwritten in the rules and in the contract or in the law that if they signed on to the 1.1, that they would have to sign on to the 3.5. And you have some senators who aren't on the right, who are pushing back on this, saying, this kind of spending is not okay. I mean, when you're looking at inflation rates, they're talking, 5 or 6%. There are economists out there that are saying it's probably more likely into the 14 or 15%.
And when is
this? That's astronomical.
Remember when inflation wasn't even supposed to happen? It was supposed to be zero inflation. I think we talked about this.
Yeah, we talked about this.
And they keep pushing the date. It's going to be bad now until at least early next year. It's not going to stop.
But it's not. It's going to compound. It's going to get worse. And we know this, right? But in this bill, right? In this bill that we've got on the table, there was some really asinine things in there. I mean, they were talking about a mileage tax. A mileage tax. When we heard from Biden, he said there will be no new taxes on the middle class.
Oh yeah,
that's not just the middle class. You're talking about taxing the poor.
Everybody.
The poor who can't even afford that, right? They're living below the line of poverty here in America, which is still a first rate. It's still like a first nation status in third world countries, right? But you're talking about this, underneath $20,000 a year, and you're going to tax them on their mileage.
So you're going to tax someone for driving a car that they pay taxes on buying on wheels, or I guess it'd be tires.
Yep, the wheel
that
tax.
were taxed with gasoline
taxed
that was taxed, with money that you got from your job, which was taxed, and the money that the company paid you was also taxed. So I mean, this is.
Yep.
Does it ever end?
No, it doesn't. I mean, the amount of times you've been taxed and you don't even you don't blink twice. Nine times out of 10, right? You just, oh, I already know what it is. You pay the things and you go on about your day. Um, but taxing the life out of the population, you're not going to make the inflation rates any better, right?
It's
You're only
gonna
going to
make
make it
it worse,
dramatically
right?
worse.
I mean, it would. In that theory, you're gonna take money away from people, and what I know they're gonna say, we're gonna do all of these things with all that money, right?
Yeah.
But I find it fascinating that my son had a football game over the weekend, right? And it was in this little town about an hour and a half away from here, tiny town. Well, this tiny town had some of the nicest roads, some of the nicest buildings
Mm-hmm.
I remember being around. I'm thinking to myself, like, dang, why is it that small towns, and not all of them, but I think you could argue that the small towns that collect, I want to say fewer taxes, they're typically conservative. They typically lean more conservative, have nicer things in these larger cities, which rake you on the taxes.
Well,
I mean, what do they actually spend that money on? I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I think a big thing we need to look at as we talk about something like this is, yes, they tax. They're proposing this tax here, but the purpose behind it, I think, is very nefarious. I think, and again, this could be tinfoil moment.
Put that hat on.
Tinfoil is straight on. Um, I believe this is a way to restrict movement, right? Because the more you start taxing somebody, they can't afford moving around as much, which means that they have to try to restrict their travel to as few miles as possible, right? And this is part of their climate control push, but it also restricts the ability to move inside of the country, right? And so when we talk about these small towns, right, they don't see the kind of traffic that these big cities do. So the wear and tear on their roads is minimal.
You make a good point.
You
make a very
you
good
also
point.
have people that there's not a lot of people coming from outside that don't care about those roads. They don't care about the way that city looks, right? That
That's true.
town looks, right? So the people that live in that community are willing to take care of what's there because they live there. And there's no outside forces that interact and ruin that, right? When you start to restrict travel, right? Maybe you see something change, but I think the state of the roads, I don't think they get any better, especially with this massive climate control push that you're seeing. You would have to eliminate the use of fossil fuels. And how do you think we make roads? I mean, what do you think powers the machinery to make concrete, to make rebar, to make these machines?
Oh, this is funny you mentioned that. What powers them? So I started thinking of what they claim to be renewable energy sources. Did you know? And I'm almost sure this happens in Europe too. This happens here in the States. A renewable energy source is using lumber to burn instead of oil because you can grow trees.
Yeah, but
you're still emitting.
Do you know why? Do you know why they have to use something like that, right?
Because it's renewable, right?
They need to use a fuel to turn a turbine.
Yeah, I mean you have to.
And that powers the turbine in order to create this green energy source to start making some sort of green energy. And then it has to go back into the turbine to be collected for electricity, right? But you need, a lot of them use like they use gases or coal in order to power to power this green energy source. I mean, it is absolutely backwards.
Isn't that
like you have these massive wind turbines, and we use a gas to power these wind turbines to make a green energy source from wind.
So you're telling me the whole thing is a facade to some extent?
It is definitely a farce in some aspect. I mean,
yes,
I can agree with trying to find alternative sources.
Oh, without a doubt.
For energy, especially ones that are
Absolutely.
more effective than what we've got now, right? If we can find something that's more effective, say like nuclear, or
I'm
hydrogen,
a huge advocate.
things of that nature would be great, right? If we could find better ways to do nuclear that are and it's already pretty safe from what I know of nuclear.
It's incredibly safe. I think people are scared. I mean, we've seen
some fallouts,
and you have,
right?
And that people remember that.
Yeah, it's
but
possible.
for the vast majority of our energy crisis, you call it, nuclear would solve all of our problems.
It could very well solve the
In my
vast majority.
From what I
Yeah.
understand about nuclear power, you can create a vast amount of energy, and the pollution into the air is just what minimal compared to
Yeah,
what we have right now.
I would agree there. I mean, nuclear is extremely efficient with zero emissions.
It's
Um,
but people are scared, and I get it. Like I get it.
mean, but when you have these situations, right? There should be we should look into the processes and
Yes.
the safety concerns of it, and figure out what we can do better to make it more streamlined, more safe.
Yes.
And then we can expand on that, right? To make more nuclear facilities that you don't have situations where you're in California and you're having blackouts, rolling blackouts during the summer and the hottest
Almost what like you can count on it happening. It's not even
months.
if it's
happened
going
for the last
to.
10 years, I think.
And it's amazing. And then they're gonna claim, well, the fires are caused from all this. Well, from what I understand, California didn't do any kind of forest management
Yep, no.
for how many years?
They weren't allowed to. I mean, it
Which-
was outlawed.
Which is it's insane to think that forest management would have prevented. I guess it's impossible to tell, right? We'll never actually know how many fires it would have prevented, or to the extent of damage that could have been prevented.
But you can assume quite a bit.
But you can say for certain that it would have prevented a amount, whether that's 1%.
Whether it's minute or not.
It could have done something, and they chose to not do it for the sake of
Yeah.
saving the environment.
I agree.
Which
I mean,
we both agree the environment is something you can't just trash all over it.
no, of course not.
Which I think nobody in their right mind believes you should just trash all of it. To say that conservatives just want to piss away the earth, I think is a horrible.
Yeah, I mean, we're not. Nobody's here
No.
to burn it all down. Right?
Not at all.
Of course, we want to conserve, what we can,
Yes.
and the good. But there's also progress that must be made.
You have to, and really attack what you can. I mean, we're trying to. If the U.S. was a horrible contributor to the global emissions, I would say, well, maybe we do look at some of this, but we're not even close to being the worst.
No, I mean, you've got China and India are up there in the top 1 and 2 slots because they continue to burn coal,
And
they
it's
don't
okay.
Burn, they don't burn the clean versions of coal, right?
No, not at all.
The versions that don't put out as much emissions. They burn whatever coal they can find, and they don't care. They're building more coal factories every day, and they just don't care.
But they're part of the Paris Climate Accord, though. So
yeah, but
they care.
The rules do not apply.
Wait
right?
a
They
minute.
apply to what they would call a first world nation. They would apply to an America. They would apply to a France, and it's all about hampering and essentially hamstringing these nations in some attempt to maybe push a global agenda.
So they say, right, we only have X amount of years until it's completely irreversible
2050,
and the
2030.
world's going to be done, right? So that
Yeah.
number keeps changing. It has ever since Al Gore. I don't know how long ago that was now.
They created the internet.
But they say, right, we only have this many years, but then you're going to join this climate accord, which has all it is a, I'm going to raise my hand and say, I agree, it has, there's no law binding anyway. And you're going to say, well, these countries don't have to do anything until it's going to be too late. I mean, is that not an accurate, if they follow this climate accord, none of it's going to matter. At the end of the day, because you're not doing anything to the countries that are actually causing the biggest output.
Yeah, and I think the saddest part about the whole thing is that you'll have nations like America or England or France or
The EU in
Switzerland
general,
or Poland,
yeah.
right? You'll have these nations that will actually start to implement these
Yes.
green energy sources,
Yep.
trying to cut their emissions. And when they do that, they're losing the ability to be independent economically. They become more reliant upon China, who couldn't care less,
Not at all.
what they affect or who they affect, as long as they're making their economy better and they're taking over every aspect that they can. So I mean,
That's exactly what I've argued that for a long time.
I mean, unless
That's
you get
all we're
everybody
doing.
on board. But the problem is that there's still not enough technology around green energy sources that would make them viable to come close to powering what
Correct.
you need. I mean, if you were to force the stoppage of fossil fuels today, can you imagine how many millions upon millions of people would die within 2 weeks?
Oh, this is funny. I've thought about this on a different scenario, just simply losing power. just losing power in general, right? Like an EMP
Mm-hmm.
over certain parts of the states. If we were without power for 2 weeks, and you are dead on, a
I
million
mean,
millions
you're
and
talking.
millions of people would
That's what I'm
perish.
saying. Like, if you were to get rid of fossil fuels, right, nothing works, or almost nothing works. Everything would start to shut down. And I think within, you wouldn't be able to cool your house. You wouldn't be able to heat it. You wouldn't be able to keep your foods cold. You wouldn't be able to get running water. You wouldn't be able to use vehicles to get to
Mhm.
and from to find anything. Right? People would be stuck in the cities where mass chaos would ensue, and the loss of life would be, something that we had. I mean, it would total World War I, World War II, and every war you could possibly think of, and you would still have to continue the body count.
We should make or petition for a movie for that, because that sounds pretty awesome. That sounds like a fun end of times movie.
Hey, Ben Shapiro, we got one for
Yeah,
you.
call Paramount. That'd be. I mean that, and I think that Joe Manchin, when he shot down that the infrastructure deal, we're going to kind of go back. We're going to circle back.
Yeah, I mean, it's all one large loop from this infrastructure bill,
And
honestly.
that's part of what he was saying, that you're going too far too fast. That you need to be able to slowly put your foot off the accelerator, right?
Yep.
You slam on the brakes hard, you're gonna fly through the windshield. Basically, we need to be able to ease into this before we just decide hard stop everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be very good. And he understands that if you push this kind of money in this kind of a package when you don't need it, would be very bad. Just like Kristen Sinema, and she's getting a lot of flack for that. She was
She's
chased
really
into a
funny.
bathroom today and essentially held captive for a certain period of time
Because that's gonna change your mind, right?
because they people don't, they're not educated enough to understand how economics works, right? How an influx of money can disturb something, right? They don't. I mean, Joe Biden said, "We'll pass this bill and it'll be free." Essentially, is what he said.
That's
said
what he
it's gonna
said.
Be free.
Right. 3.5
Right,
trillion equals zero.
Yeah, it
That
equals
was,
zero.
That
I
was
mean,
the math.
we're going to pay for itself. But how do you pay for that? The only way you can do that is by either printing more money with no backing, which makes inflation go up, or you tax the living crap out of everybody in America, and you can't just do that with the rich because there's not enough money there. There's
So
not
they
enough
say,
wealth.
right? So they say that taxing the rich is going to pay for all of this. Now, do you honestly believe that a company suddenly making less money is not going to naturally raise prices of everything in a
No.
response to that?
Well, I mean, they've got a few options, right?
Because they've got to make that money back
Yeah.
somewhere.
So they've got a few options. They can raise the prices of their product, okay, or they can, move parts of their jobs overseas where labor is less,
Too, yep.
right? Or they just move altogether or shut it down. In which case, I
So
mean,
all three of those options, though, are going to hurt
the
people
American
here.
citizen,
They're
yeah.
going to hurt people in this country.
For sure, right? And when you talk about your Jeff Bezos and you're super rich, right? You're billionaires, right?
Billionaires. No, they're
Everybody talks about it and
trillionaires,
like
bud. They're
we could just take their money, right? If we just took Amazon's money, we could pay for so much stuff.
Mhm.
Okay, but Amazon doesn't actually have that money, right? They don't own that. A lot of that is non-tangible assets. They're in the market, right?
Mhm.
And if you were to try to tax, say you were trying to make a progressive tax on assets that aren't tangible, well, you try to tax him on what he is estimated at $80 billion.
Mhm.
What does he have to do in order to pay the tax on $80 billion
So,
when he
hang
doesn't
on.
have the actual
So,
cash assets on hand?
Is this part of the reason the IRS wants to come after your bank account? I don't want to say come after, it's kind of the wrong word.
No,
But
well,
to
they want
look
to
at your bank account for anything over $600.
Well, I think it's the easiest way to track where the money is going.
Because holy crap, the person that makes $600 on a paycheck is the ultra wealthy, right?
It really is. I mean,
I mean, come
it's
on,
the
man.
only way that you can, right? So I had a thought process, and it was something along the lines of, you can't change a currency, right? You can't force people to change the currency until you know how much currency is out there. Okay? Once you have
Okay.
grabbed the total amount of currency that's out there, and you know that people are holding money in a bank, right? You know that they have a currency, right? You could change a currency and then force them to change that in their bank to whatever number you decided for the new currency, right?
Oh,
These
that's
are
true.
things
Yep. Yep.
that
I
are
know what you're
very
saying now.
possible, right? They're very possible to happen. If the U.S. government decided we no longer want to use the U.S. dollar as our currency for America, right? They could say we're going to use the
Dogecoin.
Schenectady coin or the Schenectady dollar, right? They could make that, and they could change the value of that to be worth less than what your dollar is or more than, and then they could just turn around and say, well, we know you have X amount of money in the bank and it's valued. You had $600 in your bank account. Well, the Schenectady is only 300.
So you think that's what
we're
they're
taking your money and we're giving you back something that's obviously got no backing. It's just a fiat currency.
Is that what you think's gonna, like, they're trying to figure out how much money is actually out there right
Yes,
now?
I
Because
think
they don't
that
have any idea.
It's
There's so much. How can you,
especially cash, right? Because most people don't walk around with cash.
That's
right?
true. I
So
don't.
the easiest way to do something like this would be to be able to see what's in their bank accounts, because then you can see where all of the transactions are going to. You can. This would be the situation where you could start accusing people of say domestic terrorism or international terrorism, right? You
And
can make
that's
the
what-
accusations and then seize assets.
And that's what they're marketing this as, right? We're doing it for security reasons,
Yes.
to make sure there's nothing suspicious going
Yep,
on for
and that's-
one. And
That's exactly what they're talking about, and I think this is the situation that they're leading into right now. And it's a very dangerous and precarious spot to be in.
that just sounds like the beginning or the middle of every authoritarian movie that's ever been made.
Yeah, I mean, this is V for Vendetta. This is.
That's exact. I was trying to think of the name of it. That's exactly what it reminds me of.
I mean, it's again. I mean, they're putting Americans in this position, and the worst part is that they weren't taught this in public schools.
No, absolutely
so
not.
Most people don't understand why the government would need access to their bank accounts, and some people would be able to push back on it and say, I don't think this is right. Other people are just going to turn around and say, well, I mean, if that's what they're telling us, I guess that's what they've got to do, for security purposes.
Never let a good crisis go to waste.
And I think
Right.
this is right here is where you see something more of a global push, and that's why I talk about a currency change, right? Because as you can kind of get into a dollar change as you push a global change, right? You have a global climate crisis. You start talking about global coming together. I think this is where you could see something where they decide to try to use a global currency, and this is the easiest way to take the assets of citizens and change them into something different with maybe less value, or I mean, you can't get much less value than the U.S. dollar
Anymore.
But I mean,
It's crazy,
it's the absolute epitome of the way you could do something like that. I mean, honestly.
Where would you put? Because I get that would happen to America, Europe, Australia. I'm going to throw them in there. Then you have the outliers, and I wish America used to be what I considered an outlier. Remember when it used to be a good thing to not do what everyone else was doing? I mean, when you were growing
This is
up,
just in the '90s, it was good to be anti-authoritarian.
different,
It was
exactly.
good to be, against the system, right? All of the punk bands used to be
It's-
so anti-government.
it's a fascinating thing to think about. I
And
imagine
those same
someone
bands are now,
pushing the
government
agendas.
agendas. I mean, you can't make this up.
I hope in my heart someone has done a study on that, because I've noticed that firsthand. I would consider the conservatives the new rebellion, where back in the day, in the 90s, the liberals were the rebellion. It's completely flipped.
Yeah, I mean, we had the Tea Party. I think right now, and we say conservative, not Republican, because Republicans are fickle too.
Yes.
Not a
They
big fan
are-
of either party. This
No.
two-party system, this duopoly that we have, it's not a very smooth system anymore. I mean, at one point in time, it might have been, but even back in the 1700s and the 1800s, you had more than just two parties.
He
You had the
did.
Whig Party. You had
I don't know them all,
the
but
Democratic Party. The Republican Party hadn't existed until roughly right around Abraham Lincoln. But there were several different parties that were involved, and I think that made more sense, right? I think
it did.
right now things that we need to talk about in order to stymie the advance of the way things are going in this government is to start talking about term limits for senators and congressmen and women. I think you also need to start talking. Um,
Would you say so for the Supreme Court? Because that's a big topic too, and I've not put a lot of thought into it, so I don't know. Actually, you bring this up.
the Supreme
I haven't
Court,
thought a whole lot about any of this. Actually, this is good.
the Supreme Court is kind of a different entity because they're not supposed to be a political body. What they make their decisions on is supposed to be based upon constitutionality. So political shenanigans should never have been involved, and unfortunately, it has seeped into every
Yes.
faucet of government. Right. The point of the Supreme Court was to check and balance all three branches.
So there's this huge call right now to expand the Supreme Court simply because the left doesn't get their way, and I if the shoe were on the other foot, I don't know how I would feel, and I try to put myself in that position and say, well, I would push for that too if the court was ultra liberal. But right now it sways more conservative. So if the court was more liberal right now, would I be calling for? I don't have a good answer. I haven't put enough thought into that because I don't know how to answer this.
I don't think you can, right? I mean, I think you have to try to maintain the same balance and fairness across the board. If the court was left leaning, right? If they had a 6-4 majority or a 6-3,
Whatever. Yeah, 6-3.
but if
Don't
they had,
expand it yet.
I know I'm already trying to do it in my head.
It's already happened.
But I mean, if you had that kind of slant that you have right now, I think that you would still have to have the same opinion that we don't want to expand anything because we understand with expanding, then the other side's just going to do the same thing, right?
It's just going to continue. There's
Yeah.
a country in South America that did that. I can't remember which one off the top of my head, but they tried doing that, and
They
then
had
the
like
next election
400
went back and forth. And yeah,
judges or
their
something.
their court is now so far gone, and it's completely in disarray because they thought we're just going to do this one time. Well, then the next people get. It's the same thing with the filibuster, which I like. Again, if the shoe is on the other foot, would I want to get rid of the filibuster? I don't.
I think that's a dangerous area to be in.
It is.
I mean,
It is
if
a
you get rid of
dangerous
the
area.
filibuster, right, then it's simply a majority vote.
Because I don't want either party to have absolute control. Because I do think the Republicans are moronic just as much as the liberals in different ways. They both want to do things that are that I don't. There's both parties have things that I agree with, and both parties have things I disagree with.
Yeah, I think another thing that you can do in order to kind of slow this hill that we're rolling down, I think you can make it easier to recall
A
your
hill.
representatives.
You call this a hill? I call this like a steep mountain.
I mean,
Like
you can-
it fell fast, but think of 2019 to right now.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong,
Oh,
right?
man.
But I think that you have to have an easier way to recall the representative if they are not doing as they're supposed to, right? If they're not representing the views and the wants of the people that they're
I could agree
supposed
with
to be,
that. Yep.
I think you should be able to remove them fairly quickly, and put somebody else in their place. And we don't have that sort of system, right? You can vote them in, but it is extremely hard to remove them from that position
And
once they're in.
I think an unintended consequence, if that were to take place, I'm torn on that. I'd have to do a little bit more thinking, but that the people make decisions very emotionally based. So if it was super easy to remove someone off of something small based on an emotional decision, there could be a lot of unintended consequences. I think that's why it was written in that. And it's hard, right?
I think you might be correct there,
It's
right?
hard though. Like I get both sides.
And I'm not saying maybe like super easy, but I think easier than where you're at now.
Yeah, I'm not
Right?
saying
The
you're wrong
process-
at all.
The
It's
process
just
here is
there's so much.
long and drawn out, and by the time you could ever remove somebody, I mean, if you could do it at all, the damage that they could do in that time period could
Yeah.
be, something damning.
I honestly wish that there was. And I mean, this is not recall necessarily. This is more like a impeachment process, if you will. Do you? And I think this is going to be a thing now. I think impeachment, it used to be kind of hard to come by. It rarely ever was used up until Donald Trump was in office. I think we're going to see this be a fairly, like an almost yearly battle anymore.
Well, I think so. I mean, it was looked at as something that was going to tear the nation apart.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's, we've already fractured the nation into sides.
Yeah.
And now it's just what's politically beneficial for the next election cycle, right? We voted to do this thing, and that's what they're going to use it as.
Yep.
And I think you are 100% correct in that right there. I think they do make this something that they do to kind of posture for their base.
Yeah, we're going to impeach the guy because we don't like him, right?
I think you're 100%
I mean, that's
right.
essentially what happened with Trump. Let's all be realistic here. This was
mean guy.
It was completely partisan. There was no bipartisanship about it.
And I mean, I think the closest that you've got to somebody that's impeachable, you would have like a Joe Biden, where you actually have, laptops that are out with, things that have some shady content to them. I mean, there's at least questionable activity that should be investigated and should be looked at, right? And that would be the transparency we were hearing about. And that's just not something we're
That's something
getting.
he campaigned on. That's something I'm actually really frustrated about the whole presidency.
Did you think that you were going to get transparency?
I mean, that sounds pretty
I think Trump
gullible
was
on my
pretty
part,
transparent,
right?
He was,
at the end of the day, he was. You could talk to him.
So they said that he was the most honest president we've ever had, while at the same time, the president who has lied the most.
Which is probably an accurate statement.
Which would be an accurate statement, right? He would say the quiet parts out loud, and he didn't care.
Yep.
And then he would lie about the stupid things, the little small aspects that weren't necessary. So let's talk about a 2024 presidential race with Donald Trump as the forefront.
We're going to dive into that here?
We can dive into that. We've got a few minutes left to spare here.
See, I'm on the side that I think if Trump were to run again in 24, it would permanently, and we might already be at that point, I think if it's not already there, it would permanently fracture this country beyond repair. I really believe at that point there would be no salvaging, and it's not because I disagree with his policies. I think policy-wise he was incredibly smart, but he did have a natural knack for ticking people off. And I think that if he runs again, the line that has been drawn between the two parties never goes away. I think a Republican needs to run maybe like I don't even know. I mean, it's kind of far away when you think about it.
It is pretty far away.
Maybe a DeSantis, but there needs to be a coming together. Joe Biden promised that he was going to bring the country together. He did the total opposite.
Yeah, he definitely didn't help.
And Trump would do the same. I'm not going to disagree with his policies, but I think he would further, not by anything he can control anymore at this point, even if he was more political and presidential, I don't think it would matter. And that's where I want him back in without actually having him. I want his policies.
So
I just don't want him.
Obama, where he said he would like to be in the background telling the figurehead what to do.
Which, when you put it that way, that sounds pretty bad.
That's what I'm saying. He's running more of a ghost presidency. I'm not sure if I can agree 100% here.
Go for it.
I think Trump's got a massive base, and I think
he does.
I think that first and foremost, that he's got that, right? So he's got the base. He's got the momentum behind him when it comes to the Republican side. He's also the bully. Okay?
Yes.
He will steamroll his way through anybody, right? So he's got the determination.
Yes.
But I think by the time you end a Biden-Kamala presidency, that people will beg to have a good economy back, a Trump back in office, because by the time 2024 rolls around, I cannot imagine what the inflation rate is going to look like. I cannot
Dude,
imagine what the economic situation is going to look like. I cannot imagine the militaristic situations we'll be in. I think by the time we hit that situation, I think that they will vote for anybody that can bring them back to something that Trump had given them.
dude, it's only been what 10 months since he's been in office,
10 months, and I
and
think
things
the
are
damage
so
done.
bad.
Because I mean, there's already polls out here right now where Biden has slid so far in approval rating that they're talking about Democrats losing 30
Oh,
to 50,
phenomenal
30
numbers.
to 50 seats
Yeah,
in the House.
yep.
That would give Republicans a majority. They're talking about them losing multiple Senate seats, which would give Republicans, again, a majority, which means that you would run both houses
Well,
and not
remember,
the presidency. I mean, that right there that's going to be the one that shows them that there's something wrong. And when people start seeing that there's something wrong, right? When everybody starts waking up to that, right? And that's what you're seeing right now. You're seeing this in the poll numbers.
Well,
People are waking up.
I think that happened even in the 2020 election. There was supposed to be this massive blue shift that was supposed to occur, right? And we didn't see it. We actually
We
saw
the red
gain. So
especially in the House. You lost the two seats in the Senate, but you did see them take seats in the House, and that was not supposed to happen.
people voted split ballot. They voted Biden, but then they voted for a conservative.
Yep, because they understood there was something else, right? There needed to be a balance, and to give them a majority control, they understood. I think that there's some danger there.
Oh, there
Them
absolutely
running
was.
away with progressive left wing policies, right? Because Biden, they brought him in on the idea and the assumption that he was going to be a moderate, right? He was going to be in the middle and work bipartisanship. And so they said, you know what? We'll vote for him just for that reason, and because we dislike Donald Trump.
It was an emotional vote.
It was not a for Joe Biden vote. It was an anti-Trump vote. That's what this was.
That's exactly what happened.
Was.
Yes.
And so I think people would they're going to wake up very, very rudely when they see that they no longer have the ability to feed their families very well.
Oh yeah, your free money, your spending money. I guess it's not free money. Your spending money has dramatically decreased. What do they call it? Shrinkflation. Even if the price of the product didn't change, I noticed that at Costco, a package of toilet paper at Costco or paper towels, either one, costs the same. But now you get less rolls or less sheets depending on which product you buy. The shrinkflation. Yep. And do you honestly, in your heart, believe Costco is ever going to go back to the larger packages? I mean,
most people didn't even notice it.
Exactly.
Right? Most people didn't even notice it.
I had to hear it online on social media, and then sure enough, we actually had two of the packages, one of the old ones, one of the new ones, and I was like, you got to be kidding me.
And we see that a lot now.
And that's not going to go back. They're not going to go back to making the larger packages. People are going to spend it no matter what.
You see that with your bags of chips, right?
Everything,
back in the day,
yeah.
Your bag of chip was full to the brim. Now you get half a bag and then a half a bag of air, and it'll never go back to that position because they've increased their margin.
Yes.
And most people didn't notice it, and when they did notice, it was too late. You know.
Yeah. I mean,
that gradual, slow change where people just don't notice. Right? You put a frog in a pot of boiling water, and the frog will jump out. You know.
But if you slowly increase the temperature.
Yep. That frog will stay there and he'll cook himself to death.
And
he'll
die.
And there is something to that right now because people aren't seeing.
I think more and more
they will.
I think more and more people are starting to wake up to it.
Yep, and when they come to a complete and 100% realization of what is going on and what is transpiring right now, I think the backlash will be phenomenal.
I sure hope you're right. I mean, I at the same time hope you're wrong. I hope it doesn't get that bad. I don't want it to get that bad. It's gonna be a sad day when things are that bad in this country. They never should be.
Well, I think we're seeing a demise of an empire, of a nation.
All great things must come to an end.
I don't foresee the U.S. surviving too incredibly much longer. Honestly, I think you'll see a fracturing where states just begin to refuse governmental orders, the Fed orders, and I think they just start to say that we're just going to do what we want to do. And I mean, you're seeing that now, and I think that continues, and I think it gets worse.
Is that bad? That I'm all for that.
I'm all for states taking back control.
Yeah.
It's the way that it should have been in the first place, because nobody can regulate like a state can over the people that are in it. It's a much smaller area. It's much easier to do than it is at a federal level.
Mm-hmm. I'm all for that.
I would agree.
It's something we teach our kids when they're growing up. Don't follow your heart at that point. Don't do something because everyone tells you to do it. And that's we're gonna go all the way back to what we talked about at the very beginning. Anthony Wiggins, or whoever it was in that press conference.
Yep, Anthony Wiggins.
The governor of New York came out and was basically telling him, just get the shot because everyone else already has.
This was in L.A.
Or whatever it was. But that was a talking point to go get it, was just do it because everyone else already has.
Yep, and they kowtowed him, right? I mean, they put enough pressure on him that he felt compelled to bend the knee. And, this doesn't end until everybody stands up. And all it takes is a few loud voices to help people understand that they don't have to do as they're told all the time, right? There is a time to do what you're told, and there's a time to stand against tyranny, and I think right now is the time to stand against tyranny.
You have to.
So right now, this is a time where you have to stand on your principles, and hold strong. We're gonna have to weather a storm here. But if we do it together and we hold in solidarity, I think we can push back and take back a country.
You go down fighting in all the great rebellions of every era. I mean, you can even look at the rebellion of the United States when it rebelled against Europe to become free and independent. All the great rebellions, they had a lot to lose, and everyone was telling them, go this way, go this way. Yeah. And they didn't, and against a lot of odds, they were able to come out. I don't know the outcome of all of this, but you should never just succumb because everyone's telling you. Ever. I never teach my kids just do it because everyone else is doing it. I mean, if everyone's jumping off a bridge, are you gonna go jump off it? Did your parents ever tell you that?
Yeah, but I was always a little bit of a smart mouth. The question will always be, well, how many? If there's 500, if I can drop on some bodies, it wouldn't be so bad, huh?
Goodness,
how far is the bridge down? These are the questions we need to ask. I mean, these are very relevant to me jumping off of a bridge. But no, in all seriousness,
That's
right?
Funny.
Yeah, I mean, compliance for the sake of compliance is never advisable just because you're told to do it. You do it if it's right, if it's the right thing to do.
And never compromise yourself for it, for goodness sakes. I
No.
mean, you lose your soul, you're gonna regret it. Whether or not you're gonna admit it, every time you give in to somebody against what you actually want, I mean, you slowly chip away at who you are.
Yep.
What are you at the end of the day after all that? And we're all guilty of it. Everyone's guilty of giving into something at some point or another in time. But man, if you could just lessen that. Imagine being able to be who you actually want to be, to stand up for what you believe in.
Yep.
Like, when did that, and I feel like that's almost looked down upon depending on what subject you're talking about. Only stand up for what you believe in if it's something that I believe in.
Yeah.
If it's something that I disagree with, you really need to go away.
I agree.
It's sad.
It's definitely a dangerous position we're in right now. All I can say is hold your morals, hold your principles, and if we do this arm in arm, and we hold each other up, and we hold each other accountable, we can change this.
Mm-hmm.
It's never too late.
Ever. I agree. It's a shame. We should never be at that spot here in this country, but here we are. Thanks,
Indeed.
Joe. You're the best. We give you 2 thumbs up.
Best president ever.
That's a good hashtag. Well, you got any final closing thoughts here? Or anything else we didn't I know there's lots of stuff we didn't
There
touch
could
on.
have been more we could have gone into, but we'll try to keep it not as ridiculously long.
You know,
We could go for hours on this stuff. But I think I'm good for the night. You got anything else?
no, like I said, we start going on something else, I'm gonna go off on some other tangents. So no, this is a good spot.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us at We Articulate Podcast.
Where if you know, you know.
And if you don't, you don't.
Ooh.
Ask somebody who does. So go ahead and leave us a like. Go ahead and share the video. Leave us some comments. And you guys have a great night, and we'll see you next week.